Okay, here's a thought. What if the frantic ticking of clocks, that constant pressure to get to the next thing, what if it's all just a mirage?
Hmm.
Like, what if past, present, and future aren't this neat line we imagine, but more like a huge cosmic tapestry, all woven together, happening right now?
It's a mind-bending idea, definitely.
I know, right? Stick with us, though. Watch until the end, and you will be surprised.
And this isn't just physicists talking in labs. Think about Dolores Cannon, an ordinary woman, really, from Arkansas.
Right, not your typical guru figure.
Not at all. Starting back in the 1960s, she and her husband, he was actually a police officer interested in regression. They kind of stumbled into this through hypnotherapy.
And from that seemingly normal start came something really extraordinary, QHHT.
Exactly, the Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. It was her method for getting into these really deep trance states.
To communicate with what she called the subconscious.
Yeah, she described it as this universal guide, source of immense wisdom you could tap into.
And through thousands of these sessions, this revolutionary idea popped up again and again.
That time, the way we experience it, just ticking along linearly, it's not the fundamental reality.
So what is?
It's more like a vast ocean where every single moment, past, present, future, it all exists together, right now, in the innate of you.
Okay, wow. So why should this grab your attention? Why does this matter?
Well, because these ideas, which sound pretty out there maybe, they actually find echoes in some really cutting-edge science.
Like Einstein, quantum mechanics.
Precisely. And also in ancient spiritual wisdom, shamans, Buddhist monks, they've talked about similar concepts for ages.
So her work is like a bridge between these worlds that seem so different, science, spirituality.
That's a great way to put it, a secret door, almost.
So in this deep dive, that's our mission, right? To unpack Cannon's really bold concept.
Yeah, things like revisiting future lives, or shaping time with our own minds.
And then compare them. See how they stack up against scientific theories, relativity, quantum physics, even string theory.
And also, look at how they resonate with spiritual traditions from all over the world.
And finally, think about what it all means for us, living our lives right now in 2025.
Exactly. How could this change things?
Okay, so let's rewind a bit. Dolores Cannon herself, born 1931. Her early hypnosis work with her husband, it wasn't about past lives initially, was it?
No, not at first. It was more about forgotten memories. Standard regression stuff for the time.
But then it shifted.
It did. Past life regression started coming through. Really detailed, astonishing narratives. And that led her to develop QHHT and this communication with the subconscious.
And her books, the Convoluted Universe series, starting in the 2000s, that's where she really shared these ideas about time.
That became the main platform, yeah. Sharing these revelations that came through the sessions.
So her credibility, it wasn't academic, like you said.
Nope. It came from the sheer volume and consistency. Over 40 years, thousands of hypnosis sessions.
And these patterns just kept showing up.
Consistently. Pointing towards time being essentially a human construct. And this bigger reality, this now day, where everything is happening at once.
Like the movie analogy, you can pause, rewind, fast forward, see any scene.
Exactly. She suggested time might be accessible like that, not just a one-way street.
What's really fascinating is that her findings aren't just isolated, are they? You mentioned connections.
Right. Science, with its own strange discoveries and ancient traditions, contemplating time for millennia. They seem to be looking at pieces of the same puzzle.
So Einstein's block universe idea, where all time exists.
Yeah, or how quantum mechanics seems to defy our normal sense of time order.
And then you have things like Hindu reincarnation or shamanic time travel concepts.
It's like different angles on the same mystery.
Yeah.
Our goal here is to connect those dots.
So we'll look at things like, could Cannon's time junctures relate to wormholes in physics?
Or maybe her idea of pure energy connecting to quantum fields.
And how do spiritual healing practices compare to what happened in her sessions?
Definitely. But we also need to acknowledge the different approaches, right? Science wants proof. Traditions often seek connection. Cannon, well, her focus was often on healing, the cure.
Okay, so here's the plan for this deep dive. First, we unpack Cannon's view of time. Like a treasure map, maybe.
I like that, a map of unconventional ideas.
Yeah.
Then we overlay that with science.
We'll try to simplify the science bits, maybe touch on some of those theories that sound like sci-fi.
Then we travel, metaphorically speaking. Look at how spiritual traditions worldwide have tackled these questions.
And finally, bring it all back home. What does it mean for us in 2025? Can we really, control time with our minds? Is it liberating?
So join us on this adventure. Maybe, just maybe, that ticking clock isn't the final boss we thought it was.
So what if the way we experience time, past, present, future, all in a row? What if that's just a story, something our minds create?
That's really the core of what Dolores Cannon found, wasn't it? Through decades of exploring the subconscious.
Yeah, this perspective that could totally flip your view of reality. Time, as we know it, an illusion.
Not a line, not a river, not even a steady beat.
More like just this one huge present moment, the NW, where everything that ever happened or ever will happen is happening right now, simultaneously.
That's the fundamental reality in her work, the N now W. And our sense of linear time is almost like a limitation we put on ourselves.
Okay, let's dig into that map of reality she charted through QHHT.
Right. In those deep trances, her subjects connected with that source she called the subconscious, this massive reservoir of knowledge.
And what did it say about time?
Things that often sound illogical at first, but when you look closer, they offer some really intriguing viewpoints. Let's break down the key concepts, like cosmic clues.
Clue number 1, time isn't what we think. We're taught from day one, right? Linear, birth, life, death, clock time, earth spinning.
But the subconscious told Cannon something radical. Time, the way humans define it, doesn't really exist.
Wow, okay. So forget past, present, future as separate boxes.
Pretty much. From that subconscious perspective, every instant is right here in the NWO. They're not points on a line, but different aspects of this single eternal present.
Like a huge panoramic photo, maybe?
Yeah.
All your memories, experiences, even possible futures, all in one frame.
That's a good analogy. And you know that feeling of deja vu?
Yeah, that weird I've been here before thing.
Cannon suggested those might be little glimpses into this NWO, moments where you touch on experiences happening simultaneously across your timeline.
Even she found it hard to grasp initially, right? She wrote about it in The Convoluted Universe.
Absolutely. It challenged her own pragmatic worldview deeply. So if it shook her, imagine the implications for us.
Okay, next layer. Everything's relative and simultaneous.
Her work suggested our linear view is just local, specific to Earth. If you were on Mars, or floating in space, your sense of time passing would be totally different.
So we basically invented clocks and calendars to measure something that isn't inherently structured that way.
That's what the subconscious seemed to say. Hours, minutes, seconds, useful tools for here. But fundamentally, all events, all lives are unfolding together in this big now lane.
Which leads to the idea of experiencing futures, things that haven't happened yet in our line.
Exactly. It sounds wild, but her subjects often describe future experiences right alongside recalling past lives.
How did the subconscious explain that?
It consistently said things like, everything has already occurred and nothing has yet occurred simultaneously.
Like a symphony with all the notes playing at once, but we only hear one melody.
That's a great way to think about it. One client might be describing being a space explorer in the future, another reliving being a medieval peasant.
And both were real, happening in the same eternal present.
According to the subconscious, yes. That simultaneity is really mind-bending, and it starts to hint at connections with science and spirituality we'll get to.
Okay, let's climb another step. Beyond our perception, in other realms or dimensions, time just stops.
Pretty much, yeah. Here on Earth, we're stuck with minutes, hours, the 247 grind. But in these higher states, time just isn't relevant.
Consciousness itself is timeless.
In its purest form, yes. Time, in this view, is more of a material thing, a construct tied to having a physical body on Earth.
Like playing a video game with a timer on screen, but when you step away from the game...
The timer disappears, exactly. Before and after lose their meaning. Cannon's sessions showed this repeatedly. In pure consciousness states, like deep trance, limitations fall away, including time.
Maybe that explains dreams or deep meditation where hours seem to pass in minutes.
Or vice versa. Ever had that? Cannon would say you just gotta peek at timeless reality.
Okay, now for something that sounds straight out of sci-fi, time has junctions, and they're permeable.
Yeah, like crossroads or meeting points in time. And they're not solid barriers.
Yeah.
The subconscious told her travel and communication across different points in our timeline are possible. It involves something akin to exceeding the speed of light, energetically speaking, and needing the right alignment within humanity's time to bring information through clearly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it gets messy.
She also talked about different layers of time interacting, didn't she? Cosmic time, Earth time, biological time.
Right. And when those layers get out of sync, it can manifest weirdly. like feeling empty or totally exhausted for no reason.
Does that sound like those time slip stories people tell? Or feeling fundamentally changed after an altered state?
It resonates, doesn't it? Cannon thought these time junctions are like invisible doors we can learn to use with our minds. Maybe we're slipping through them unconsciously already.
Okay, buckle up. Time as energy.
Yes, a dynamic pulsating energy that actually creates matter. And it's linked to consciousness itself, self-directing energy.
That sounds abstract.
It is. Cannon tried to explain it. This energy creates everything us, the world. And we as conscious beings can influence the outcome. But the main control is at the source, not just in our bodies.
Like a cosmic dance. Time's energy is always moving, creating, and our consciousness can join in, maybe change the rhythm slightly.
That's a good image. If time is energy and consciousness is energy, maybe our minds can interact with time way more than we realize. Ever thought about that?
So, if these ideas are fundamental, why are they so hard for us to grasp?
Cannon suggested it's because we're so anchored in our physical bodies. We get attached to the linear story because our senses dictate so much of our perception.
Sight, sound, touch. Our imagination is huge, but often tied to what we sense right now.
Exactly. Time for us is heartbeats, sunrises, birthdays. But the subconscious suggested even our history books aren't totally accurate about time. Its true nature is limitless. Our bodies impose the limits on how we see it.
Like we're wearing glasses that only show a narrow slice of reality.
Perfect analogy. And when we take those glasses off, maybe in trance, meditation, dreams, we glimpse time as it really is.
Yeah.
Infinite fluid, no start, no end. Our limited senses are the main barrier.
But we can expand that perception.
Through practice, shifting awareness.
Yeah.
And maybe even start to consciously play with time's fluidity.
And now the really wild one, time travel as pure energy.
Yeah. The subconscious described shifting our state of being into like a focused beam or particle of energy, moving so fast we're imperceptible.
And in that state, you can be energy or reform as solid, moving across time and space.
That was the idea. The energy of the spirit is fundamental, transcends dimensions, doesn't need a GPS.
And we can exist as energy and physically in different times simultaneously.
Even more mind-bendingly, yes. Consciousness is the key difference. If we learn to consciously dematerialize into that energy state,
we could then rematerialize in the past or future while still being here now.
That's the implication. It sounds like a superpower science hasn't caught up with, but maybe spiritual traditions have hinted at it.
Okay, let's pull these threads together. Cannon's map of time. Illusion, everything's now at a billion, it works differently elsewhere or not at all. It has traversable junctions, it's energy we can influence, our bodies limit our view, and we might travel as energy.
It sounds like a fantasy movie plot, doesn't it?
Totally, but derived from thousands of real hypnosis sessions, ordinary people seemingly tapping into extraordinary truths.
And this map isn't just intellectual candy. It challenges how we live. If time's an illusion, why stress deadlines or carry regrets?
If we can influence time's energy, can we be more active creators of our reality?
And if we're already navigating time unconsciously, what does that say about our connection to everything?
So we have this incredible map. Now, how does it line up or clash with science, with spiritual traditions?
Do Einstein and the shaman see eye to eye with Cannon? Or is she charting completely different territory? Let's find out.
Okay, so we've got this intricate, kind of startling map of time from Dolores Cannon. Now let's hold it up against science.
Right. Do the physicists, with their particle accelerators and complex math, do they see anything like this? Time is illusion. Everything in the NOI.
Or is Cannon exploring a cosmic landscape science hasn't really mapped yet?
Prepare for some weirdness then. Wormholes, fundamental particles, the fabric of the universe itself. It all challenges how we normally think about time.
But maybe, just maybe, science and Cannon's insights are doing a similar dance.
Could be more harmonious than we think. Modern science, especially theoretical physics, has been messing with our standard idea of time for, over a century now?
Since Einstein, really. And quantum mechanics keeps throwing curveballs. Time isn't that rigid, linear thing we use for our schedules.
Exactly. So let's look at how some major scientific ideas align, or don't, with Cannon. We can focus on three big ones: Einstein's relativity, quantum mechanics, and string theory.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
Let's start with the giant, Albert Einstein. His theories of special relativity back in 1905 and then general relativity in 1915, they completely changed physics.
He said time isn't universal, right? It's tangled up with space. Space-time.
Precisely, space-time. Imagine it like a stretchy cosmic fabric. It bends and warps around mass and energy, and how fast you're moving affects your experience of it.
Which leads to time dilation. That whole thing about clocks ticking slower if you travel really fast.
Exactly. If you zipped off in a super fast spaceship, time would literally pass slower for you than for someone back on Earth.
And that's not just theory, right? They've measured it.
They have, with super accurate atomic clocks on planes. Even GPS satellites have to account for it.
So think about Cannon saying time is relative. Depends on your perspective. If you were on another planet or moving differently.
Your time experience would change.
Yeah.
Exactly what Einstein described. That's a pretty strong point of convergence right there.
But there's also the block universe idea from Einstein.
Yes, that interpretation of relativity is even more direct.
Yeah.
It suggests all of time, past, present, future, already exists, like a fixed four-dimensional block.
Like a book where all the pages, all the moments are already there, and our consciousness just reads through them one by one.
That's the concept.
Yeah.
And compare that to Cannon's finding. Past, present, and future exist in the NIW. It's remarkably similar. Both point to a reality where all time is somehow already present.
And relativity also predicts wormholes, those theoretical tunnels in space-time.
It does. Scientists like Kip Thorne, who advise on Interstellar, have explored the idea that wormholes could maybe even connect different points in time.
Which sounds a lot like Cannon's time junctions. Barriers in time that aren't absolute, that could be crossed.
The resonance is definitely there. Could Cannon have been intuitively picking up on these theoretical space-time structures? Maybe the universe is more connected than our current models show.
But there's a key difference in approach, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Einstein and science need empirical evidence. Measurements, observations, math. Cannon's view comes from consistent patterns in subjective trance experiences, people reporting navigating time through consciousness.
Science can't really verify that directly yet.
Not yet, but the parallels are intriguing enough to make you think. Maybe the approaches will meet somewhere down the line.
Okay, let's switch gears to quantum mechanics, the really small scale, where time gets even weirder.
Quantum mechanics looks at atoms and subatomic particles, and things get very counterintuitive. Time seems much more fluid.
Like non-locality, entangled particles influencing each other instantly, no matter how far apart.
Exactly. That suggests the universe might be connected in ways that ignore our usual rules of space and time separation.
How does that connect back to Cannon?
Well, remember she said all things exist simultaneously in the NIW? Quantum non-locality seems to support that kind of fundamental interconnectedness. Experiments, like John Bell's back in the 60s, show connections that seem to operate outside linear time.
As if everything is linked in one eternal moment.
It points that way. Maybe our sense of time flowing is just something that emerges from our limited physical viewpoint, not how reality fundamentally is.
There are physicists who argue time itself isn't fundamental, right? Like Julian Barber.
Yes, Barber suggests the universe is just a collection of timeless nows, instants.
That sounds incredibly similar to Cannon's now.
It really does. He argues our feeling of time passing is an illusion created by our brains. And then there's the it from bit idea from John Wheeler.
That reality comes from information, from conscious observation.
Yeah, which resonates with Cannon's idea that consciousness directs the energy of time. Could our minds be more involved in creating temporal reality than we think?
But quantum mechanics doesn't explain how we could consciously manipulate time, like Cannon suggested.
Not really, no. Quantum experiments happen in labs, focusing on particles. Cannon's insights came from subjective human experience in altered states.
So the link between her pure energy idea and quantum fields is interesting, but still speculative.
Very much so. It needs more research, more theory, but the idea that consciousness is the next big frontier for understanding the universe, including time, that's compelling.
Okay, lastly, string theory, the really ambitious one.
Super ambitious. It suggests the basic bits of the universe aren't particles, but tiny vibrating strings. And crucially for us, it suggests there might be way more dimensions than the 4 we know.
3 space, 1 time. But string theory says maybe 11 dimensions, hidden somehow.
Exactly. Curled up really small. And in those extra dimensions, time itself might be totally different. Or maybe not exist at all like we experience it.
Which lines up with Cannon saying, in other realms, there is no time.
It does align. Imagine our reality is just the front of a big stage. Behind the curtain, in those extra dimensions, the rules could be completely different. time might not apply.
And theorists like Edward Witten suggest consciousness might work differently in those higher dimensions, maybe free from linear time.
That's the speculation. It echoes Cannon's view that consciousness is ultimately timeless and time limits are tied to our physical bodies.
But string theory is still very theoretical, right? No direct proof yet.
Highly theoretical. We can't test it directly with current tech. Cannon's work, again, is based on subjective accounts of timeless dimensions experienced in trance.
So different paths again. Science wants data, predictions. Cannon focused on the experience, the transformation.
But the shared idea of other dimensions where time works differently, that's a fascinating potential link.
So putting the science part together, Einstein shows time is relative. Maybe all moments exist now, like Cannon's and no both.
Quantum mechanics hints at connections beyond linear time, maybe involving consciousness, again, echoing Cannon.
And string theory opens the door to dimensions without our kind of time, like her timeless realms.
Right. The method's a totally different proof versus subjective experience, but the concepts overlap in thought-provoking ways.
It's like science and Cannon are using different tools, different languages to explore the same deep mystery.
Science is measuring carefully, mathematically. Cannon dove into consciousness. Will they meet? Who knows?
For now, these connections definitely make you appreciate how weird and elusive time really is. Science is starting to see things Cannon seemed to glimpse intuitively.
Okay, next up, let's take that global journey. How have spiritual traditions worldwide thought about time? Do the shamans and monks agree more with science or with Cannon? Let's find out.
Okay, so we've wrestled with the science relativity quantum weirdness. Now let's pivot to the wisdom found in spiritual traditions across the globe.
Right. How have different cultures understood and interacted with time? Do their views echo Dolores Cannon's ideas about the now and time not being strictly linear?
This should be fascinating. We're talking Hindu temples, Amazonian rainforests, maybe Afro-Brazilian spiritual practices, shamanic circles, places where time is often seen very differently.
Not as a rigid line, but maybe a cycle, an energy, a doorway to something bigger.
Could these ancient keepers of wisdom have already grasped insights about time that Cannon rediscovered through hypnosis? Let's go on this spiritual expedition.
So Cannon's view challenges standard Western thinking. Time's an illusion. Everything's simultaneous. Consciousness can cross its borders. And interestingly, many spiritual paths seem to reach similar conclusions.
Not through labs or equations, but through things like ritual, meditation, direct experience.
Exactly. Communion with the divine, or just understanding the fundamental nature of reality. Let's look at maybe 4 broad groups: Hinduism and Buddhism, indigenous practices, Kardecist spiritism, and shamanistic traditions, including Afro-Brazilian ones. See where they align and differ.
Okay, first stop, Asia. Hinduism and Buddhism. Ancient traditions, millennia contemplating time.
In Hinduism, time isn't linear, it's cyclical. Samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, rebirth.
Souls going through countless lifetimes, part of huge cosmic cycles, the yugas.
Right, and that immediately clicks with Cannon's idea that all lives exist simultaneously in the Anabu. Samsara implies this deep connection across time, all within an eternal cycle.
And practices like meditation or yoga in Hinduism are seen as ways to access states beyond normal time, maybe glimpse past or future lives.
That's the idea. Ancient texts like the Upanishads, which are thousands of years old, talk about Brahman, this ultimate reality, pure consciousness, where time dissolves.
Which sounds a lot like Cannon's descriptions of other realms where there is no time.
It's very similar. Picture a yogi deep in meditation, feeling that unity where past and future just merge into the present. That's like Cannon's now in practice.
And Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, also talks about linear time being illusory.
Yes, often described as a mental construct, something our minds create. They acknowledge change, impermanence, but see linear time as a product of our thinking.
What about the Tibetan Book of the Dead? Doesn't that describe seeing past lives between incarnations?
It does. Descriptions of intermediate states, the bardo, where you might get this panoramic view of past existences. That mirrors Cannon's simultaneity idea. Everything has already occurred and nothing has yet occurred.
And Buddhist meditation also often involves exploring past lives, similar to how Cannon used hypnosis.
There's a parallel there, definitely. Using altered states to access what seem like previous incarnations.
But the focus is different, isn't it?
Key difference in emphasis, yeah. Hinduism and Buddhism are often focused on karma, escaping the cycle, reaching moksha or nirvana. Cannon was more often looking at healing, understanding, expanding consciousness within the context of experience.
So for them, transcending time is about liberation. For Cannon, maybe more a tool for transformation now.
That seems to be a fair distinction. But that shared understanding of time being cyclical and ultimately something you can transcend through awareness, that's a big connection.
Okay, next stop, the Americas. Indigenous peoples. Amazonia, Native American tribes like the Lakota, their view of time is tied to nature.
Deeply intertwined. Time is often seen as cyclical, following the seasons, the moon, the sun. It's about renewal, repetition, not linear progress.
Which aligns with Cannon rejecting strict linearity, emphasizing interconnectedness.
Absolutely. And what really connects indigenous views with Cannon is that deep sense of timeless ancestry.
Ancestors aren't just in the past, they're present, guiding.
Exactly. They're considered active influences now. In ceremonies like the Lakota sun dance or Amazonian rituals with ayahuasca, people enter states where past, present, future blur.
A shaman might travel to talk to an ancestor or see the future. Sounds like Cannon's time junctions.
It really does. Traversing time through altered states.
Yeah.
Imagine being in a forest ceremony, feeling your great-great-grandparent right there with you. That is Cannon's now in action.
The method is different though, hypnosis versus sacred plants, community rituals.
Totally different context. For indigenous cultures, time is often something to honor, a connection to the earth and spirit world, not necessarily control, but that fundamental idea of past and future coexisting now. Powerful echo.
Okay, let's shift to Spiritism. Codified by Allan Kardec, big in Brazil, how do they see time?
Also relative, spirits in Spiritism are believed to exist in an eternal present. They aren't bound by our linear time.
So texts like the Spirits book say spirits can access the past, see the future, because time isn't a barrier for them.
That's the core idea. It lines up remarkably well with Cannon saying, in other realms there is no time. For spirits, it's all kind of simultaneous.
And spiritist practices like psychography, spirit writing often bring through historical info, like lifting the veil of time.
Yes, that's a common aspect. Plus, Spiritism uses spiritual regression to explore past lives, again paralleling Cannon's use of hypnosis for understanding the NOW.
What's the main difference there?
Probably the framework and purpose. Spiritism has a defined doctrine focused on moral evolution, charity. Cannon's approach felt more exploratory, gaining knowledge about consciousness, the universe.
But the idea of crossing time boundaries through altered states, hypnosis, or mediumship is a strong link.
A very compelling convergence. Makes you wonder if the entities communicating are Cannon's subconscious or maybe different facets of a similar underlying reality.
Okay, finally, shamanism and Afro-Brazilian traditions like candomblé or palamonte. Time is a portal.
Yes, a portal to the sacred. Shamans worldwide enter altered states, drumming, plants, chanting to reach dream time, or the spirit world, a place where past, present, future are fluid.
So a shaman might journey to heal something in the past or bring back future wisdom. Sounds like Cannon's travel as pure energy.
The resonance is strong. And in Afro-Brazilian traditions like candomblé, the deities, the orishas, and ancestral spirits, eguns are experienced as timeless.
Like Oxum, the goddess of love, exists outside time but shows up powerfully now in a ritual.
Exactly. During a spiritual working, a jira, practitioners might get incorporated by these entities who can bring messages from different times, like time as a bridge.
Again, like Cannon's time junctions, allowing communication across time.
Very similar feel. Plus, both shamanism and Afro-Brazilian paths often involve transforming into energy for spiritual travel.
A shaman's spirit flying as an animal. A candomblé initiate channeling divine energy.
It mirrors Cannon's idea of dematerializing, traveling as energy particles. The main difference is often the context communal, ritualistic, music, dance, versus Cannon's one-on-one hypnosis.
But the core idea of time being fluid, accessible through altered states, that's consistent.
The really significant parallel across these diverse traditions.
Okay, so wrapping up the spiritual tour. Hinduism, Buddhism show cyclical, timeless reality like the N-Now-W.
Indigenous traditions show ancestors present now, aligning with simultaneity.
Spiritism describes a timeless spirit realm with permeable time barriers, like time junctions.
And shamanism, Afro-Brazilian paths see time as a portal, linking to travel as pure energy.
The big theme seems clear. Most spiritual traditions reject strictly linear time, embrace interconnectedness.
Exactly. Even if their methods and goals differ from Cannon's focusing on the divine, community healing the resonance with her core findings is striking.
It's like humanity, through spiritual seeking, kept hearing the same cosmic tune that Cannon picked up in hypnosis.
A tune suggesting time is less a ruler, more a river to explore.
Okay, next. Let's try to bring it all together. Science, spirituality, Cannon. Can these different views create a more whole picture of time? Let's dive into that synthesis.
All right, we've journeyed through Einstein's cosmos, the quantum fuzziness, and the wisdom of global spiritual traditions. Now let's assemble the puzzle pieces.
We started with Dolores Cannon's vision. Time as illusion, everything the inevitable, may be traversable by consciousness. Sounds like sci-fi, but grounded in her work.
The science seemed to, maybe cautiously, approach similar ideas. While spiritual traditions often claim they've known this stuff for ages.
But are they really aligned, or are Cannon, science, and spirituality doing different dances around the same mystery of time?
Let's look at where they converge, where they diverge, and what it all means for understanding this fundamental thing called time. Grab a coffee, maybe. Let's synthesize.
Okay, common threads first. What links these three perspectives?
The biggest one is challenging linear time. The idea that time is much more fluid, more interconnected than we usually think. It's like they're different instruments playing variations on that theme.
Cannon's big one. Past, present, and future exist in the N, now W. Where does that connect?
Most directly with Einstein's block universe idea from relativity. All moments coexisting in space-time, like the whole story is already written.
And quantum mechanics supports nonlinear connections too, with non-locality.
Right, instantaneous links suggesting connections beyond time and space barriers.
How about spiritual traditions?
They resonate strongly with nonlinear time. Hinduism, Buddhism see cycles, meditation potentially collapsing time. Indigenous cultures feel ancestors present now. Spiritism talks of an eternal present for spirits. Shamanism accesses dream time, where time is fluid.
It's kind of amazing that a physicist, a shaman, and Dolores Cannon could all basically agree that strictly linear time is an illusion.
It is remarkable, considering their vastly different starting points and methods.
Another alignment point, time might not be universal or fundamental everywhere.
Exactly. Cannon said in other realms there is no time. As we know it, consciousness is timeless. String theory hints at extra dimensions where time might work differently, or not at all.
Like, the rules change depending on where you are in the cosmos, or what dimension you're in.
That's the idea. And spiritual traditions echo this for centuries. Brahman in Hinduism is timeless. Nirvana in Buddhism transcends time. The spirit world in Spiritism is outside linear time. Shamanic dream time is beyond normal time.
So our experience of linear time might just be local, specific to being human here on Earth.
That seems to be a common implication across canon, some scientific theories, and many spiritual paths.
Okay, third convergence point. The role of consciousness.
Huge one. Cannon believed consciousness could influence time's energy, shape reality, even allow time travel.
And quantum mechanics hints at this too, the observer effect.
Yeah, the idea that just observing a quantum system changes it's just mind and matter are linked more deeply than we thought.
How does consciousness feature in spiritual views of time?
Centrally. In Hinduism, Buddhism, it's the focused mind, meditation, that transcends time's illusions. In shamanism, the shaman's consciousness navigates other realms. Afro-Brazilian traditions use altered consciousness for divine interaction. Spiritism emphasizes the spirit's enduring consciousness beyond earthly time.
So across the board, consciousness seems key to understanding, maybe even interacting with time.
It really does seem to be a fundamental piece of the puzzle in all these perspectives. Maybe reality is more tied to consciousness than science currently grasps.
Okay, but despite these overlaps, there are big differences too, right? Especially in how they do things.
Oh yeah, huge differences in methodology, focus, and how they validate their ideas. They're using totally different toolkits.
Science needs empirical proof. Experiments, data, math.
Right. Testable hypotheses. Einstein's theories were tested. Quantum mechanics relies on precise measurements.
Cannon's work was based on subjective reports, consistent stories from thousands of sessions.
Exactly. Qualitative data from trance states. Consistent patterns, but not quantitative in the scientific sense.
And spiritual traditions, their method is direct experience, ritual.
Yes, meditation, ceremonies, mediumship. The focus is often personal or community experience, connecting to the sacred. Validation comes from transformation, tradition, perceived results, not lab tests.
So science wants objective data. Cannon trusted consistent subjective accounts. Spiritual paths rely on experience and community wisdom. Very different ways of knowing.
Definitely. And their goals differ too. Science aims to understand the universe's laws, build models.
Cannon, while exploring, often seemed focused on healing, helping individuals.
There was often a therapeutic aspect, yes. Expanding self-understanding, resolving issues.
Spiritual traditions usually aim for what? Liberation? Connection?
Often, yeah. Enlightenment, union with the divine, connecting with ancestors, spiritual growth. The focus goes beyond just intellectual understanding. Time is often seen in relation to those bigger spiritual goals.
So science explains, Cannon healed and explored, spirituality seeks transcendence and connection. Makes sense.
And finally, how they prove things is different. Science needs verifiable, replicable evidence. Theories must make testable predictions.
Cannon's validation came from the coherence and consistency she found in the trance narratives.
That seemed to be her primary validation.
And spiritual traditions validate through personal change, ancient wisdom passed down, the feeling that the practices work for connecting people to something bigger.
Right. Deeply personal, often cultural validation. It operates outside the scientific proof framework. These differences show fundamentally different ways of looking at reality, including time.
So what's the takeaway from comparing them?
Maybe that science can offer frameworks for how some of Cannon's phenomena might work, but Cannon and spiritual wisdom offer broader perspectives on the experience and meaning of time that science doesn't capture yet.
A truly holistic view might need all three, acknowledging what each does well and where its limits are.
That seems like a productive way forward. Synthesizing insights, respecting the different approaches.
Okay, now let's bring this home. What are the practical implications? For us, living in 2025, how can canon, science, spirituality change how we deal with time day to day? Let's reflect on that.
Right, let's start with Dolores Cannon's ideas. If time really is an illusion and it's all about the NW, what does that mean practically for us in 2025?
Well, society pushes us to constantly worry about the future, right? Planning, anticipating, or dwell on the past, regrets, memories.
Cannon's view is a counterpunch to that. Really engage with now. Think about how much stress comes from the clock ticking.
Deadlines, anxiety about what's next.
If we really took on board that it's all happening in the NW, maybe we could ease up on that. Appreciate the present moment more.
Like being stuck in traffic instead of fuming about lost time.
Maybe use Cannon's idea to just be there. Breathe, listen to music, notice things without judging. It sounds simple, but practices like mindfulness, focusing on the now, are actually shown to reduce stress.
So her intuitive ideas kind of anticipated what psychology research is finding now.
It seems that way. And if past, present, future coexist, maybe we can reframe our past.
Instead of being weighed down by mistakes, see them as just other facets of this now. Opportunities to learn from right now.
Exactly. That could be huge for people struggling with guilt or anxiety about the past. Her QHHT work often helps people do that, access and reframe past stuff for healing now. Maybe we can all try adopting that perspective.
Okay, what about science? How might understanding relativity or quantum mechanics impact us in 2025, beyond just GPS tech?
Well, think about research into how we perceive time. Neuroscience shows our brains construct that feeling, and things like stress or attention really change it.
Which fits Cannon's idea of time being relative, depending on our state.
It does. As we understand the brain and consciousness better, maybe we could develop ways to consciously tweak our time perception. Access altered states more easily.
And quantum mechanics suggesting consciousness might shape reality, that observer effect thing.
It resonates with Cannon's belief in consciousness influencing time's energy. We're seeing advances in brain-computer interfaces now. Early days, sure, but could they eventually let us explore that mind-reality link more directly? Maybe even hint at interactions with time we can only guess at now.
Pure speculation, but interesting directions for science.
Definitely intriguing. Now, spiritual traditions, what guidance do they offer for today?
Well, the focus on present moment awareness in Hinduism and Buddhism lines up perfectly with Cannon's now. And practices like mindfulness and meditation are huge now for stress relief.
And science keeps backing up their benefits for well-being, maybe even impacting our subjective sense of time passing.
What about indigenous or Afro-Brazilian traditions?
They remind us about connection to nature, ancestors, community. In our often disconnected digital world, they emphasize cycles, relationships beyond just our own linear life. Cannon also talked about interconnectedness across time.
So maybe integrating some of that, connecting with nature mindfully, exploring our heritage, could help us feel more timeless, more grounded.
It could tap into that deeper sense of belonging that transcends the day-to-day rush.
What if we could actually blend these perspectives? Canon, science, spirituality. In 2025, tech is racing ahead. People are seeking well-being, meaning.
It feels like a unique moment. Imagine scientific research starting to validate some of Cannon's ideas about consciousness and time, maybe using advanced brain scans or even VR to explore altered states.
VR is already being used to explore memories, even simulate past lives therapeutically. Sounds a bit like Cannon's work.
It does hint at possibilities.
Mm.
And spiritual traditions could offer the ethical framework, the mindfulness, for using such tech wisely.
Neuroscientists working with meditators. Therapists inspired by Cannon collaborating with researchers.
That's the kind of integration that could be really powerful. Dolores Cannon passed in 2014, but her legacy, QHHT, it's growing. Shows an openness to her ideas.
But it's not easy, right? Integrating these.
Definitely challenges. Science is often skeptical of things it can't measure easily. Quantum hypnosis might raise eyebrows.
And some spiritual paths might distrust tech, emphasizing traditional practice. Plus, just our ingrained habit of thinking linearly is hard to shake.
And there's the risk of commercialization. Turning deep practices or therapies into quick-fix wellness products, losing the authenticity. We need respect as we explore these intersections.
So ultimately, how can these ideas change your life right now in 2025?
First, maybe try cultivating more presence. Focus on the NW, even briefly. See if it cuts stress, deepens appreciation. That taps into canon and spiritual wisdom.
Second, remember the past-future connection to now. Maybe feel empowered to heal the past, shape the future through present awareness and choice.
And finally, recognizing we might be connected to something bigger than our individual timeline. Through science, spirituality, or canon's view, can give meaning, perspective.
Maybe the biggest impact is realizing our relationship with time is more dynamic than we thought.
We really are at an interesting point in 2025. Science evolving, ancient wisdom resurfacing, pioneers like Cannon finding resonance. Maybe a more integrated view of time is emerging.
Now, speaking of things you might find resonant, some good news. If you're finding this deep dive fascinating and you leave a comment, YouTube will better understand your taste and will recommend more content like this to you.
Yeah, it helps the algorithm know what you're into.
So please also subscribe and share this video. It really helps us keep exploring these kinds of topics.
Okay, so we've reached the end of this particular exploration into time. Or maybe, as Dolores might say, just another point in the eternal and now a W.
Where beginnings and endings are just perspectives.
We've covered a lot of ground. Challenging ideas about the clock. Cannon's view of time as illusion, the simultaneous and now W.
Then we looked at science, finding surprising echoes in Einstein, quantum physics.
And we journeyed through spiritual traditions, seeing ancient perspectives on cyclical, interconnected time. Now let's just briefly wrap up what it all might mean.
Quick recap then. We started with Dolores Cannon, QHHT. The subconscious revealing time isn't linear, it's a set now accessible via consciousness. Challenging stuff.
Then science. Einstein's relativity, time being relative, the block universe echoing the Endelia. Quantum mechanics hinting at interconnectedness, consciousness playing a role. String theory suggesting other dimensions where time is different. Different methods, but moving beyond simple linear time.
Then spirituality. Hinduism, Buddhism showing cyclical time, transcended by meditation. Indigenous paths feeling ancestors present now. Spiritism's timeless spirit world. Shamanic Afro-Brazilian paths accessing fluid time realms. Long traditions recognizing nonlinear time.
Synthesizing them, we saw convergence, questioning linear time, interconnectedness, the role of consciousness, but also differences in method, proof versus experience versus ritual, and goals. Explanation versus healing versus transcendence.
And finally, we thought about implications for 2025. Embracing the now for presence, science potentially deepening our understanding of subjective time, spiritual wisdom offering connection, and maybe integrating these paths.
What really comes through is just how multifaceted time is. Science gives us frameworks for its physical side. Cannon offers a compelling experiential view, suggesting we can engage with it consciously. Spirituality gives context, meaning, connection to the infinite.
So is time a human construct, like Cannon said? A fundamental reality science is still figuring out? A sacred cycle, like spiritual paths believe?
Maybe the biggest takeaway is just recognizing how profound and mysterious it is.
Here's a final thought to leave you with. What if your own experience of time is more fluid than you think? Try bringing your full attention to right now, just for a few moments today. See what unfolds when you consciously inhabit the N Now W.
And a great quote from Dolores Cannon from the Convoluted Universe, Book 1.
Everything is energy, and energy is consciousness. When you understand this, you realize there are no limits, not to time and not to you.
Let that sink in as you go about your reality.
There are now 2 videos on your screen. Click on one to continue your journey of discovery.
And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video so you can keep exploring topics that intrigue you.